Mike Rhoades dismissed Kanye Clary from the team. Oh, but how could Penn State basketball do this? He's the leading scorer. I'm here to tell you that the team is going to be better off without him.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right, Penn State fans. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Seyko. Joining me once again, special guest, men's basketball insider for Penn State's Com Radio. That is Adam Sheetz. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more is a winner. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. You know the rest. Follow along with Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest discussions around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And you can keep up with Adam on X, formerly known as Twitter, as he was one of the first ones talking about this. Kanye Clary dismissed from the Penn State basketball team. Normally, we don't get breaking news of this caliber out of a Mike Rhoades press conference, but here we are on a Monday, and before we actually discuss the news and everything and what's going to happen, it's important to start with this. Is Penn State basketball better off without Kanye Clary? And I think they are. We had a small sample size, and we discussed this about 2 weeks ago, Adam, together, that when Kanye Clary was, and it was an injury, unfortunately, I don't like to see any, unfortunate circumstances, but Penn State went on the road and won back-to-back games where they struggle more often than not, especially in the last decade when they're up at Indiana. But they beat Rutgers and Indiana convincingly without him. Okay? It's not like they won by a couple of points. They were 7-point underdogs, and they won those games both by double digits outright. Oh, but that's your leading scorer. Penn State can't afford to lose him. Penn State needs to throw every dollar in the NIL bank account. No, they don't. Because we discussed it again 2 weeks ago. Kanye Clary was holding this team back. Do I think he's a great scorer? Absolutely. He's the leading scorer on the team. But Adam, in that same breath, he was taking 33% of the shots. 1/3 of the team's offensive possessions were ending with him taking the basketball. And then on defense, he was just too much of a liability. So yes, he was giving you 18 plus points a game, but I got to imagine in college basketball, it's not as readily available like the NBA with the plus and minus statistics. But I got to imagine that Kanye Clary's plus and minus statistic was not very good.
Yeah, I mean, especially since he's come back. I mean, they've played a different way since he's come back. They played the way they did at Rutgers and Indiana. They've added him back into the lineup. Coming off the bench, they've kept starting DeMarco Dunn since the return. I'm sure maybe that had something to do with this. Maybe, chemistry issue. Maybe Kanye wasn't very happy coming off the bench in that role as opposed to being one of the starters. Him and Ace Baldwin were always going to be an interesting fit because they're two ball-dominant guards, and they're going to try to mesh off each other, but they're both slightly undersized as well, so it's hard to play both of them at the same time. And if one of them doesn't have the ball as much, how's that going to work? And a lot of different things. And I think, that just all culminated into maybe this decision, after a lot of talk about Kanye no longer being a part of the team, just because it really wasn't working anymore for Penn State. I mean, Kanye, as you mentioned, he was a great player, especially early in the year for them, was their leading scorer. But a lot has gone on since, especially since that injury he suffered against Minnesota. You've seen something change with Kanye Clary. He's not scoring a lot off the bench as much as he was when he was in the starting lineup earlier in the year, since they've changed the way they are playing. And that's changed a lot of things for Penn State. So I think in the long run, this is going to be a good move. You mentioned they're better this year. I think, I kind of got this feeling, early January that Kanye Clary was going to not be with Penn State in the future. Not this season, but, I thought he was probably going to be looking maybe to move on to a different school, just try to find a different role and enter the transfer portal. I didn't think he'd be removed from the team before the season ended. But, I mean, that's just the way we're at right now with what Coach Rhoades decided to do. I think you have to respect his decision. He's going to do what's best for the program now and in the future. And I think Penn State can rally around this. Now, he did also announce that Demetrius Lilly will still be day-to-day. He got a procedure this week dealing with his injury that he's been out. They got to get him back because they're very thin at the 5 position right now. Yes. But I think in the long run, I mean, in Penn State, their guards, you're going to got DeMarco Dunn's going to get more minutes. Jameel Brown's going to get more opportunities as a catch-and-shoot guy. Zach Hicks and Puff Johnson can play more on the wing. Nick Kern Jr. gets more opportunities as well. And Ace Baldwin's now, again, still going to have to be the guy that's going to give you 38 to 40 minutes a night. So I think that's going to be good for the long run, but, definitely got to get healthy and get everyone back minus Kanye Clary and see what they can do. But they played well without him, and I think that's one thing Penn State can look at going into the game on Wednesday, that we can do it without Kanye Clary. So they're going to have that confidence going against a very good Illinois team inside Rec Hall.
The immediate pushback from our analysis of this, that Penn State's going to be better off. Well, they just lost by a bunch of points to Nebraska and he wasn't there. That has to do with the fact of this probably happened. This decision came before Mike Rhoades' press conference on a Monday afternoon. The team knew that's tough to adjust, especially when you have to go on the road. Nebraska is much better this year. They're 16-1 at home in their last 17 games. That was a tough Cornhuskers team. It's not like they lost to a Michigan team at home, and they beat Michigan, but I'm saying they lost to a quality Big Ten team on the road. And that's tough to adjust when a focal point of your team, for better or for worse, Kanye Clary was a focal point, was the face of this offense for a majority of the season. And all of a sudden you just cut ties. For me, when I was at the Iowa game and seeing Kanye Clary in the game and selected minutes, right? Still kind of, what the injury, was it his role being diminished? I think a combination of both. You have to work your way back into the lineup. You don't just take some time off and then it's like, okay, let's go 38, 39 minutes. You're back in the game. No, you have to adjust. But there was also, you saw that he was coming off the bench. You saw that he wasn't getting as much usage in the offense. And when Kanye Clary was getting the ball, forcing shots, bad mistakes, dogging it. Seriously, I'm following Kanye Clary to see, okay, how is he adjusting in this new role? I want to see what he's doing, try to pin, it's important when you watch a sports game, watch it outside of just where the ball goes. Try to watch an individual player, a wide receiver in football, a player that's off the ball in basketball. And for Kanye Clary, just seeing him in the Iowa game, just kind of trot back and forth, not really stay with his man defensively. And Mike Rhoades sees that too. And the second I picked up on it, guess who's coming out of the game and being subbed in for? Kanye Clary is going back to the bench after moments like that. So that's one game where I was able to pick up on that in a few possessions. So this is, again, the writing was on the wall there, Adam, that this has been kind of brewing now for a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One thing, I didn't say a lot about it when it happened, but because, Penn State had played well since and Kanye played well in the second half of this game. But in the Michigan game, in the Palestra, Kanye Clary had to be calmed down by one of the assistant coaches going into a timeout. His attitude was a little off. There was a 3 near the end of the first half that Ace Baldwin Jr. took, and Kanye Clary immediately put his hands up in the air. It was a little weird. And, you didn't think much of it because Kanye ended up playing well in the second half. He played really well against Wisconsin in their upset win a couple games later, and it was like, okay, so Kanye's fine. Maybe it's just a little spat, spur of the moment, competitive nature, guys butt heads. That happens all the time, and they get through it. And now, of course, you start to see that maybe this is something that's really just been brewing. Kanye, his attitude. He's a young guy. I think that's something everyone's got to remember as well. He's a sophomore, so maybe just some immaturity showing. It's his second coach in 2 years. Mike Rhoades didn't recruit him to Penn State. Kanye Clary never entered the transfer portal, so it's not like Coach Rhoades had to really try to recruit him to keep him. I think Kanye was kind of like, I'm just going to stay here because it's where I want to be. And now obviously that's all changed for Kanye, and he's probably going to move on to somewhere else next season. Don't know where that will be, but definitely a lot has been going on with this, and you've kind of seen this situation. You've been watching it closely kind of brew up. The interesting part was he played a lot in the second half against Michigan State. He started the second half against Michigan State, so you thought, well, maybe something's changing. Maybe Kanye is going to get more of an opportunity. And obviously then the next game they play is Nebraska, and he ends up not even traveling with the team, and then announced today that he's no longer a part of the team. So a lot, this, as you mentioned, Zach, this has been brewing for a while. And then I think finally Coach Rhoades, and I'm sure Kanye Clary was probably on his way out as well, kind of like wanting to maybe be dismissed. Yeah. So I think, it's kind of mutually parting ways, maybe is what we can say as well.
I couldn't agree more. I felt like this was a mutual decision. You could just see from body language from the player himself, Kanye Clary, and then ultimately, Mike Rhoades. Benching him, right? We talked about on the show, definitely cut his minutes back, but probably don't, change the way the offense operates. You don't necessarily have to bench him, but Mike Rhoades went that extra step, and Kanye Clary was benched. I don't know if that was to make an example. I don't know if that was because they started to shift into a system that they felt a little more comfortable with, but Penn State is better off without him. We're going to talk about that more, of what the team is going to look like going forward. And is there still any way to salvage this season? That's coming up next on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers will get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 is a winner. That's $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players, your favorite NBA teams, with things like quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. You can combine all your favorite bets together into one parlay with boosted odds and boosted winnings. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And the Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and now find it in the free Fire TV channels app. Remember, if you want to keep up with Adam when it comes to breaking reports about Penn State men's basketball, you can follow him on X, formerly known as Twitter. So we already had a glimpse of what this team's going to look like moving forward, because in the two games where Kanye Clary was completely absent, I know you have the Nebraska game too to go along with it, but that's different when he's recovering from an injury versus, oh, he's not on the team anymore. He didn't make the trip. So there's kind of that morale, that emotional aspect of it. And just from, you listen to the Penn State broadcast, there was this kind of this dull, gloomy sort of feeling like Penn State really didn't feel like getting off the plane that day to play at Nebraska. But I'm trying to put into perspective that this team is going to have to recover from this, right? You are going to have to get over the fact that your brother, your teammate, is no longer with the team. But adjusting from an X's and O's standpoint, Penn State's going to be better defensively. DeMarco Dunn is a much better defender. He's also a larger guard. He can handle the tougher assignments that Kanye Clary couldn't necessarily do, from just being not as good of a defender, but also the size limitations as well, guarding a number 2 in the offense here. So you're going to get some lower scoring games. Now, we did see Penn State put up a bunch against Indiana, but I'm thinking that you're probably going to get something more in the ballpark. Penn State's not going to try to outscore you. They're going to play more efficient basketball. And I think the defense overall gets better, but it's going to come at the cost of not as many points on the scoreboard. And I get it. Everybody likes offense. I really do. I understand that. But if Penn State wants to win games down the stretch, and this Big Ten conference schedule is still unforgiving, you're going to have to play a lot better defense if you want to make any noise going into the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you're not outscoring Illinois on Wednesday, because Illinois can score with anybody. You're going to have to win this game with your defense, and I think, the lineup they're going to throw out there is a very good defensive team, and it's a lot better defensive lineup than they'd have, if they had the two undersized guards, as we mentioned. DeMarco Dunn is more versatile. Jameel Brown's been up and down. He shows his youth a little bit as a defender at times, but he's a guy, he's not going to be out there for 40 minutes. He's in and out, a guy who can spot up shooters. Zach Hicks has been very good defensively as of late. Puff Johnson's been a good defender as of late as well. Nick Kern Jr. is obviously maybe their best defender if you look at the versatility, because of how long he is. So he makes a huge difference as well. So I think, they have a lot of guys they can put in the lineup now and be very different versatility-wise defensively. Obviously, the inside's going to be the question with Qudus Wahab. Right now, Favor Irave's been his backup. Leo O'Boyle, as we mentioned a couple times, is undersized in his ability to play down low. So they've really only got 2 true bigs to guard other teams' bigs. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that till Demetrius Lilly can get back in the lineup. But I mean, you mentioned it. I think they have a lot of confidence. I mean, obviously this game's going to be tough at Rec Hall. They're going to have a great crowd because it will be at Rec Hall. They're going to have, be in the return to Rec game. And then they play Indiana. They beat Indiana without Kanye Clary once this year, and they get them at home, which should be a good thing. I mean, everyone's going to say in the Nebraska game, if you want to say Penn State's going to struggle without Kanye Clary, but you just look at that game. They weren't making shots, so I don't know if Kanye Clary really would have made much of a difference, because they were getting some looks. They just couldn't make anything. It just wasn't their day. It was an 11 a.m. local time start, so that was maybe weird for Penn State trying to play that early. So we'll see. You know, it's just it was a tough game. It was a perfect win. Nebraska had a lot of rest. That was Penn State's 4th game in 10 days. There was just a lot of things going against Penn State heading into that game in Lincoln. And Nebraska's a really good team, especially at home, and they executed very well to get that win. Penn State made it tough. Their defense was pretty good, just offensively weren't able to knock down the shots they needed to. So I think that's something they're going to continue to work on. I mean, I wouldn't write them off. I mean, we've seen teams, after, these type of announcements play really well, most notably Ohio State on just yesterday on Sunday, they beat Purdue after firing their head coach, Chris Holtmann. So, you now officially announced that Kanye Clary is no longer on the team. You might see a rejuvenated Penn State team, not saying that they're going to be happy Kanye's not there, but play with a lot of energy, play with a lot of effort on Wednesday, and they could maybe pull off an upset at Rec Hall. You never know. So I think, there's something to look at. Just how does this team respond? I think they're going to do a good job. Puff Johnson was asked about it in media today. He said it was a coach decision, didn't want to elaborate, kind of next man up, let's move forward. Let's just try to be the best team we can be this season. And I think that's what they're trying to do. I think the team's going to respond very well. I think Mike Rhoades has the ability to get this team to respond really well. I think the locker room really revolves around him. That was the question today, was how's the locker room? And I think they were like, we lost 3 straight, so no one's happy. But I mean, it's kind of just, trying to keep moving, trying to get better every day and see what we can do. So I think that's something Penn State's going to be looking at going forward. And I think there's going to be a lot of energy, especially to start against Illinois, and they're going to need it. You can't get down against a team like Illinois, which really can pile it on if they get the chance.
Here's this 5-game stretch. It's almost a little bit of deja vu, not exactly the same. But Micah Shrewsbury and company a season ago had the last 5 games of the season, and you had to win essentially 4 out of the 5 to get some more and then go on a run in the Big Ten tournament. The season is not over. Penn State would need to put the winning streak of all winning streaks together in order to make an NCAA tournament. But Adam, I like teams that have nothing to lose, because what does Penn State men's basketball have to lose at this point? You have with all the identity question marks, you have a teammate dismissed. Again, we assume that it's a mutual thing, but the announcement was that he was dismissed from the team, and he was, again, the face of your offense for the time being. The face of this team should have always been Ace Baldwin Jr. Kanye Clary might be better at getting to the basket than Ace Baldwin, but Baldwin can get you 5 to 6 steals on any given night. He's a very talented player overall, and just better at handling the basketball, and just frankly more disciplined and more. And you talked about it, the inexperience, kind of handling it from a maturity standpoint. And Baldwin's done that. He's been that, and it's also Mike Rhoades' system can now kind of return to what it was at VCU. I'm not saying they go to slow motion. First 1 to 50 wins. It's not going to be that, but it's going to be more efficient basketball. Because I'm seriously tired of Penn State basketball taking a possession down the court and throwing up a random shot in 4 to 5 seconds. Pass the ball, distribute it, and get the rock in the most open player's hands and see what you can do. Now, the question is which players are going to have to step. We already talked about Kudus Wahab, Nick Kern, and Puff Johnson, just to name a few. DeMarco Dunn's the obvious one because he's gone into the starting role. But you mentioned the point of the Demetrius Lilly needing to be healthy, because him and Kudus Wahab rotating in, that allows them to stay, I don't want to say fully healthy, but I guess in terms of energy, a lot more energy, because Wahab can't play 40 minutes a night. Baldwin can. Nick Kern might. But Wahab's got to rotate in and out and quickly so that they can maximize their talents when either of them are on the floor. Is there anybody else that you look at, Adam, and says, like, this player needs to step up in the absence of Kanye Clary now?
I think there's a couple. I think, obviously Jameel Brown has to step up, especially because he's going to be getting more minutes. So he's got to be a guy that's going to got to step up, really buy in defensively. He's had stretches where he's been a good defender, and obviously he's a great shooter when he's on. So he's just got to keep shooting and do things like that. I think another guy, when we were talking about the big rotation, Favor Ira, I thought he's played really well. It's just, just the two of them, and then Leo O'Boyle coming into spot minutes makes it very hard, I think, for just everyone trying to do that. I think Demetrius Lilly having 4 guys that you could potentially go to, especially in the Big Ten when foul trouble is going to happen and you got to have depth to be able to go turn to. I think that's going to be huge. But I think Jameel Brown, if you look at the guard position, DeMarco Dunn's going to have to step up as a scorer. We've seen it at times this year, but more consistently now, knowing that you're really the second guard option to score the basketball. You got to be able to step up and create your own shot when needed, knock down the open jumper. I think he's going to step up, and I think he will. He was kind of, talking about how he continues to get better and more comfortable in his role as the seasons progressed. And I think now knowing, hey, you're the true number 2 two guard now. I mean, Kanye, even when he was coming off the bench, maybe if DeMarco kind of mentally thought, well, Kanye's back, so he's obviously the number two scoring option. Now it's like, okay, well, now I'm that number two guy, and he's got to step up and knock down the shots, take the pressure off Ace Baldwin Jr. to be the only guy that's really creating his own shot off the dribble. And I think DeMarco Dunn can do that, and I think he will do that down the stretch. It's going to be great for them in the long run as well, because DeMarco can come back next year, and you have a guy that's getting this experience at the end of the year and building towards next year. Maybe he takes another step and becomes an even better scorer, because he didn't get a lot of run at North Carolina and now getting a lot of chances now with Penn State. So I think he's the guy that's going to have to step up the most, especially offensively, for Penn State to be successful.
Penn State plays Illinois, as you mentioned, the return to Rec Hall game, and that is this Wednesday with a tip-off of 6:30. After this break, we're going to talk about what Penn State can do to potentially upset Illinois, but it's going to be a tough one as they're going up against the number 12 team in the country. That's coming up next on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you the access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you can have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate in 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process that much quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. You can keep up with Adam on X, formerly known as Twitter, for those breaking reports around Penn State men's basketball. And in this final segment, let's preview Penn State versus Illinois. This is, again, similar to the 5-game stretch that Penn State men's basketball had a season ago with Micah Shrewsbury to try to finish the season strong and then go on a Big Ten tournament run and sneak into the NCAA tournament. Never say never, but like I said, your backs are against the wall. You have nothing to lose. It's not even that their backs are against the wall. You have nothing to lose. Everybody's counted you out. People thought you were going to finish last in the Big Ten anyway. You might as well go leave it all out there. And then it's the Rec Hall game, the return to Rec Hall. So this returning to your roots, a little historical factor here. And you don't just not get up for one of these games, especially when you are facing a top 15 team in Illinois. Now, Illinois has been very good. They're second in the Big Ten. They're 19-6 overall coming into this game, Adam. And now they've dealt with some off-the-court issues regarding Terrence Shannon. I'm not going to comment too much on that, but the dude can play basketball, averaging over 21 points a game. And with all the stuff, all the other distractions, Illinois seems pretty focused with where they are. So Penn State, this is probably not the most ideal matchup you could have had. Now, I'm not saying you change the Rec Hall game or you pick a different opponent. You never knew that. How did you know that Illinois was going to be top 15 in the country at this point in time? But they do a lot of things well and with, like you said, Demetrius Lilly not being out there, Illinois is probably going to try to attack the paint and clean up the glass very well. And that's the key to beating this Penn State team, unless Nick Kern and Ace Baldwin, who would guard Terrence Shannon at this point? Really, either of them could, Baldwin or Kern.
Yeah, I think they definitely have a lot of options. I would probably go with Nick Kern Jr. just because he's 6'6". Terrence Shannon Jr. is 6'6". He's got size. Ace Ball won't be undersized trying to fight. I mean, it's going to be a tough game, and I think the toughest part about it is something Penn State can't control, and it's Penn State beat Illinois 3 times last year, and Illinois beat Maryland, and they hinted that, history played into this one. Like they were ready for Maryland. They wanted to beat Maryland because Maryland beat them last year. So I think, Illinois is going to come in. They're going to be pretty motivated. They know that, they lost in the Big Ten tournament to Penn State. They lost at Penn State last year on the road, and they lost to them at home. Now, very different team. I mean, Jalen Pickett scored 41 in the game last year. Jalen Pickett's not going to be there to score 41 this year. So, I mean, it's just going to be a very interesting matchup, and I mean, it's stuff they can't control. But, as you mentioned, Terrence Shannon Jr. really makes this team go. He's one of the best guard scorers in the country, probably going to be first team all Big Ten. He missed some games early, but he's playing really good right now at a 20-plus point performance against Maryland over the weekend. So, he's going to be tough to stop. It's going to be a tough matchup for Penn State. Coleman Hawkins as well. I mean, Coleman Hawkins is a guy that's been around, and Penn State's seen a lot. He can jump out of the building. He's a freak athlete. Yeah. He's going to be an interesting matchup for Penn State to have to deal with. Illinois is going to want to run. They're going to want to get up and down. And I think that could favor Penn State a little bit if they're able to set up their press. Michigan State wanted to run, and the problem in that game was Penn State couldn't get the press set up. Michigan State just beat them down the floor the entire game. Got to be able to make shots so then you can set up your press and not allow that run and really kind of slow them down a little bit. You're not trying to slow them down, but you make them set up, and then maybe you can speed them up when you want to, and you dictate the pace instead of them dictating the pace of the game. I think that's going to be huge for Penn State in this one. They're going to have to make shots. We mentioned they really struggled shooting the ball. Coach Rhoades was asked about their offensive struggles at Nebraska. He said, well, I gave them the day off on Sunday. That's how we figured that out. Just kind of give them the day off, reset, then come back on Monday and Tuesday and right before Wednesday and shoot around, trying to just, get the shots falling. They've got good shooters. They're getting good looks. Just have to make them. That's going to be the key. Make shots and not allow Illinois to run up and down. You got to find a way to force turnovers. That's their bread and butter, is when they force turnovers and score off those turnovers. That's going to be huge in this one. They're going to have a great crowd, as we mentioned, the Rec Hall game, the history, probably going to be close to a sellout. The crowd's really on top of you there. It's a great setup for college basketball. They should have a good turnout, so we'll see if Penn State's able to compound that and able to get a win. But it's going to be a tough matchup, and I'm sure Illinois is going to be ready to go.
Yeah, Illinois will be the favorite at this time. We don't have a spread. We don't have a total, but the biggest concern for me is that Penn State is going to have to avoid being out-physicaled and out-athleted the way they were twice now against Michigan State. And Illinois has similar components. I mean, they're averaging 11, 12 more rebounds than Penn State. And like you said, that injury to Demetrius Lilly is a big deal. So I think key players in this one are Caduce Wahab and Faber Ire. Can they step up in addition to a Baldwin or a Nick Kern Jr. trying to take away to limit? You can't take them away. Limit what Terrence Shannon could do. Adam, what are the odds that Penn State can win this game?
I think the odds are very low. If we're being honest, it's just Illinois is a great team, and I think when you look at a team like Illinois, it's a bad timing. You as we mentioned, look, all the Kanye Clary stuff going on right now. You're just coming off a tough loss to Nebraska. You're on a 3-game losing streak, and now you're staring at the number 12 team in the country that's very motivated. Purdue just lost, so I'm sure Illinois is thinking, well, we could backdoor our way into winning the Big Ten if we, keep winning and keep the pressure on Purdue. So I think there's a lot of motivation there on the Illinois side. As we mentioned, they lost to Penn State 3 times last year. Brad Underwood's going to have the guys ready to go because a lot of guys returned to this Illinois team, so they're definitely looking at last year. Unlike Penn State, where it's a lot of new faces, Illinois, it's like, we're looking at last year and the teams that got us, and we're really motivated to come back out and beat them the second time around, and they're going to be ready to go. And I think it's just a tough timing for Penn State, but they'll have a great crowd if they can make shots, get off to a good start, get momentum on their side, keep the pressure on Illinois. That's what you have to do, because we thought they had a bad timing and little chance of beating Wisconsin. They were able, even not with a great crowd at the Bryce Jordan Center, able to turn that into a win. Now you're going to have Rec Hall, which is going to be a phenomenal turnout. The students will be there. As Mike Rhoades always says, they'll have that backing, and they should have a really good opportunity to win if they can get off to a great start. But if Illinois gets rolling, they're a team that they're kind of like a freight train. Once they get going, it's hard to stop them. So I think that's just going to be the huge thing. The quick start, to avoid that for Illinois and for Penn State to get off to that quick start, is going to be huge.
I think Illinois wins a heartbreaker. I think Penn State keeps it close because, like I said, I talked about it earlier. I like teams that have nothing to lose because they play loose, they play free, and it's honestly, when you go in and you can be that bull in a china shop, it's what works in these kind of spot situations. So I think, but like you said, the talent for Illinois is just too much to where they're not going to make enough mistakes for Penn State to capitalize. So it'll be close, but I think Illinois wins in the final seconds, honestly. And that'll do it for this one on Locked On Nittany Lions. Adam Sheetz, men's basketball insider for Penn State's Com Radio, joining us once again to give us his perspective on the ever-changing situation with Mike Rhoades in his first season in Happy Valley. Adam, thanks so much for the time, the perspective, and hopefully no more crazy news breaking like this, but it's always great to talk some men's basketball with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.